what the impact of the dementia had on the care that was what Eric was saying. And of course, discuss the ways and means by which we can address these issues altogether to restore vaccine confidence and maintain it, right? Maintain it, that's what you said. That was what Eric was saying. It's not only now, it's for the future. So, how do vaccines work? The review. Most of us would probably know that, yes, your favorite word, immunity. There are two types. The active, which one are you? Maybe the active, and the passive immunity. The active is when you have the disease and your body produces the active immunity that develops, which is usually long-term and more permanent than what we call the passive immunity, which is really just putting out the antibodies in your body. And it could be like your maternal antibodies. That's the reason why you give measles at 9 months, because the babies usually have still maternal antibodies. It's like your passive immunity. But this is not lifelong. This is only temporary. So, what vaccines do would be to reproduce a natural infection with less complications. We always say that with natural infection, when you have the disease, there is a more lasting immunity when you survive it. But if you don't, there's no more immunity, there's no more life, there's no more. You're dead 6 feet under the ground. But that is what vaccines will do. Because once you are able to get an effective and safe vaccine, this is not supposed to give you an illness, and the low risk of adverse reaction will greatly outweigh the risk of complications by the natural infection. That's what vaccine does. It removes the risk of getting the fatal disease. Definitely, we want an ideal vaccine. And what is it? We want it to be safe. We want it to be safe even in immunocompromised patients. That you can give it for those with SLE, those with HIV even, and those who have even congenital immunodeficiency syndrome. It should be highly effective and optimally induce this sterilizing immunity. Of course, it should also be affordable. Diba? What good is a vaccine if you cannot pay for it? And it should also be preferably easily to administer. Lalo na yung mga takot sa turok. Oral is very nice with oral polio, and rotavirus, by the way, is oral. But definitely, it also has to stand our hot climate. It has to have a thermal stability. Otherwise, your vaccine can go sour. It will lose its potency if you don't keep it in a cold storage. So, it has to have the long-lived immunity. But we all know that vaccines cannot be 100% safe. That is the number one requirement, safety. And that's the reason why we now are in a crisis because of that vaccine safety issue that we have. But it can never be any drug, any vaccine for that matter, cannot be 100% safe. But remember, when we do all these clinical trials, you remember that many of you will be scientists or are scientists already. We know the scientific method of how we are able to assess the safety, the efficacy of all the drugs, the vaccines, whatever substances we try to experiment on. We need to make sure that when it goes into the commercial activities, that it will always be able to produce a very, very small risk. And that when you say that it is safe, it means that you are preserved from a real danger. That's what you have to be conscious about. In this sense, vaccines are safe because the danger they prevent for the diseases far outweighs the danger of side effects that they may present. Remember that very well, because this, if you are in vaccinology, is one of the most essential principles. Because, for example, I will show you in a few minutes, this is the risk-benefit. We always have a big bunch of benefits outweighing the small risk. Everything we do has a risk. even climbing stairs for the geriatrics patient. Diba? Yung asawa ko nga, nagkasunod na hulog sa hagdan. Even riding an airplane, 1 is to 180,000 risk of crashing. Sa car, 1 is to 80,000. Sa airplane, 1 is to 180,000. For polio, 1 paralytic polio vaccine derived for every million doses. That's a whole lot of comparisons. Diba? Those are the risks that we always have to think about. So, we now see that we are always so aware there is a risk. But if you do not see the disease, as Eric said a while ago, you do not fear the disease, you fear the vaccine. And this is what happened when you now listen to the anti-vaccine group. They will always hysterically say, exaggerate all the risk, and they will never say the benefits. That is what happens. In this kind of misconceptions that I am trying to figure out a way, there has always been, since time immemorial, since the vaccines were first developed and discovered by Edward Jenner in 1790, more than 220 years ago, there has always been this vaccine hesitancy. But because humans are intelligent enough, and the anti-vaccines are not, then you realize that in fact, for 220 years, we have been able to save 3 million children a year globally. And we have reduced the mortality of children, as Eric then also said, because of clean water supply and vaccination. Those are the two most important elements that have reduced our child mortality. In fact, the Philippines was able to achieve MDG 4 in 2015 because of water, clean water, and vaccination. Now, these are the things that have developed after Andrew Wakefield published his very now infamous MMR autism. Things began to develop. The anti-vaccine started to come out. And as we all know, that paper on MMR autism published in New England Journal in 1998, 16 years after, was removed, was actually evidence not to be true to fact, and that the author himself, all the authors have also detracted there, except Wakefield. All the other authors have detracted that paper, except Wakefield, who is a British man now, whose license has been removed in Britain, but is now practicing in Texas. And Texas is now one of the biggest anti-vaccine group in the US. Anyway, all of this, whether you are dimenophile and autism, no evidence that has surfaced that said this is so. Your MMR and that you said your tetanus vaccine and sterilization. Remember, during the time of Flavier, they were saying, oh, it should not be voted in the Senate because he did vaccination of tetanus toxoid, which is supposed to be multi-fashion and will cause family planning because he wanted. You know, that was really something that made him drop from #1 position to #4 in the election, because people believed that that was so. But let you tell that there is no evidence to that effect whatsoever. There could have been a tiny HCG in the vaccine, but that has no bearing at all on aborted fashion substances. Okay, and of course, OTP and sterilization, some people say that there is something in oral polio that is there that can also cause that child to be in the future sterile. That has no basis at all. That is what you see in the internet. For every good vaccine news that you will see in the internet, there will be 600 anti-vaccine in the internet. Believe it or not, you try it. That is how we are now facing this very massive anti-vaccine. And of course, other misconceptions that we cannot afford vaccine. just try the health economics issue. And it also needs a little bit of scientific information, scientific data to really compute the real health economic issue when it comes to affordability. Because the benefits, the risk, the life saves, the dallies, these are complicated issues that no congressman or senator will ever know. Of course, we do address the issue of adverse event. The late Cecil Montalban and I and Dr. Suzette Lasso used to be with the DOH and WHO AEFI committee way back before Eric we were there. And we have been doing our role in assessing adverse events following immunization. You know, DPT can cause hyporesponsive hypertensive episodes, which can cause death for those mothers who fell asleep and the baby didn't suddenly after giving the DPT that day, HHE, that's hypertensive, hyperresponsive, biglang nag-aspirate, and when the mother wakes up, the baby is dying, is dead. So these are cases that we have also seen that over. So what we call real adverse event, the HHE. But that doesn't go out in the open very much because we know for every adverse event that is actually leading to some, it would actually cause a deterioration or damage to our immunization program. So there are many things that could be also coincidental. Anyone who had been vaccinated crossed the street and then suddenly a vehicular accident, that's also an adverse event following immunization. And there are so many coincidental things. A child was just supposed to be vaccinated and then suddenly, just even before he's vaccinated, one story goes like this. Suddenly had seizure. Hindi pa napapagana. And what if he had just been vaccinated tapos nag-seizure? Then it would have been caused by the vaccine. But this has happened also. So what these adverse events are actually are also part of the AEFI community because we always want to see the real honest to goodness assessment before anything is really concluded. Because temporal association does not cause causation, and that just because one event follows another does not mean that the first caused the second. And for you who are medically inclined, maybe scientifically inclined, you should always be able to do it. These are the side effects, adverse effects that we usually associate with many of these vaccines, and they are already in the literature. And you can see this, and you should be able to tell your patients when you give these vaccines, because they are already in place, like BCG, your injection site, your wholesale, the HHE, which I said a while ago, can be caused by pertussis, DPT, that can actually cause severe or has caused fatal episodes in children who aspirated and choked while the mother was asleep. So the others, like measles, you can have thrombocytopenia, rubella, acute arthralgia, and arthritis. And of course, we also say that these are possible to be common, could be rare, and the occurrence could be by how frequent they occur. Because some would occur very infrequently, very rarely, and some will be much more common. And usually the more common ones are the fevers, rash, perhaps, or even body-a-day, just like Cialis. But the rare ones are really rare, and as I said, the risk is not so much. And this is how you compute. If you think that a vaccine is associated with a disease, you have to come up with a formula like this. That if you have a vaccine group, the rate of the disease in a vaccinated group should be compared so that you can come out with a rate that will tell you, yes, the risk in the vaccinated are much higher than in the unvaccinated. So we'll not go so much with it, but that is how the autism was debunked, that there was nothing in the MMR group that said they are more prone to autism than those who are not vaccinated. And this is what we need in terms of threshold. We want to make sure that a vaccine should be given as high as 94%, like for measles, because the relative risk of them transmitting it to people are higher. The highest is measles. One measles case can translate the disease to 12 to 18 people at one time. So you can multiply. This is a mathematical computation. And that's the reason why for measles, you have to have a high threshold of 95% coverage so you are able to get the herd immunity, meaning the unvaccinated patients will get the benefit from the vaccinated ones because it's highly transmissible. Whereas the other cases, like smallpox, diphtheria, one case can transmit to 6 to 7 people. So you don't need as much coverage. This is what you call the relative risk. Now, just to let you know that what happened to the Philippines has something to do with a tale of vaccine safety miscommunication. And we all know what happened. The dengue is one of the fast-growing disease in the whole world today. Since 1950, the Philippines has had 30-fold times increase. 1950, the Philippines was the first one to report in the Asian Pacific. Remember Dr. Lulu and my mentor? 1954, the Philippines, the first one. And since then, the incidence of dengue, hemorrhagic fever, has multiplied by 30 times and is still increasing. In fact, in the world today, it has increased by 50 times. And mind you, the Philippines has one of the highest incidence of dengue in the world and in Asia Pacific. And we will not go into that, but you will soon realize that one of the reasons maybe why we are so concerned about dengue is its high, high fatality rate even. We have 10 times the risk of dying from dengue than in Thailand. So if you have to have dengue, do it in Thailand. And I will not tell you about this because I don't have much time. You know what happened after the Senate hearing, and the things that came out of that hearing made people fear vaccination, and definitely this resulted in the reduction of vaccination, and it was predictable, the measles outbreak, declared in February of this year by our Department of Health, and definitely we all realize that with the decade of the vaccine coming to an end by next year, we are now in the low threshold of our protection. Our vision is fast going down. And who do we need now? You, everyone. You here, everywhere, we need those credible voices for the value of vaccine, just like what Eric did and what maybe some of us would have tried to do when we had a chance, but were not listened to. The Doctors for Truth, headed by then former Secretary